Skill 2 is all about darts. We are going to be sewing plain darts and contour darts. You should have these 3 patterns. I want you to start by cutting out around the outside edge of each of them. Once you have all 3 pattern pieces cut out, I want you to take your fabric and I want you to start off with a nice, clean, straight edge here. So snip and rip if needed. I want you to measure down on this selvage 12 inches, snip and rip off a whole length of fabric that is 12 inches long. For skill 2, we're going to do 2 separate dart samples. We're going to do a plain dart sample and then a contour dart sample. So I want you to take your 3 pattern pieces and look at them. So by now we have gone over that getting started PowerPoint in class, and I want you to remember how important it was about grain lines and how the grain lines help us place our patterns on our fabric. The only thing you need to remember is that the grain line is always parallel to the selvage of the fabric, okay? So always just look at your pattern piece, find the grain line, and make sure when you place it on the fabric, it is parallel to the selvage. So again, this is our grain line for each of them. Another important thing you need to keep in mind is the cutting instructions for each of these, okay? So for our front bodice, we cut 1 on fold. That means we place this edge on the fold of the fabric. For our back bodice, we're gonna cut 2, which means we can just fold the fabric so we have 2 layers and cut around at one time. And then for our contour dart pattern piece, we're just gonna cut 1. So you can just lay it on 1 layer of fabric and cut 1. So watch how I fold my fabric and then place my pattern pieces on them. I'm going to take the selvage on the right and fold it over. I know I need to cut my front bodice on the fold with this edge right on the fold of the fabric. So I'm going to fold my fabric and I'm using these lines on my grid mat to make sure that when I fold my fabric over, that the fold is parallel to the selvage. And make sure when you place it down that it fits, okay? You can pin your pattern to your fabric or you can just use weights. Make sure that this edge of your pattern piece is right on the fold of the fabric, okay? Now for our back bodice, we also need to cut 2. We can just cut through 2 layers of fabric at one time. So again, I am going to fold my fabric over, make sure I'm folding it so it's wide enough for my pattern piece. It would be really helpful to have a ruler so you can make sure that everything is parallel and like your grain line's parallel to your selvage. So I like to be really economical with my fabric and fold it over just enough for my pattern piece, okay? And what you're looking for is that your selvage is parallel with your fold, so you can measure it here. When you measure it down here, make sure it is the exact same measurement. And then make sure your grain line is parallel to your selvage as well. Once you get that laid right where you want it, use your pattern weights or you can pin your pattern piece to your fabric. All right, one last piece is our contour dart. And we just need to cut 1 out of this. So I'm just gonna place it right on my fabric. I like to be, again, economical with the amount of fabric I'm using. So I'm gonna place it really close to here. I'm gonna make sure, I already made sure this fold was parallel to the selvage, so now I just need to make sure that this grain line is parallel to the selvage. Now you can go ahead and cut out around these. You can use a rotary cutter to cut them. You can use a marking tool to trace around them and then cut with scissors. I'm gonna use a rotary cutter. As you're cutting, you really need to take your time and be really precise. And also you may have to walk with your fingers along the edge of the pattern piece to keep it held down as you're cutting. This helps it from pushing the fabric out of the way or kind of shifting things around, okay? So once you've gotten everything cut out, you should have really accurate representations of your pattern pieces. Next, I want you to take and snip all of your notches that you see on the pattern pieces. They should be at your shoulder seams and at the ends of your dart legs. Remember, notches are just little tiny snips that we do into the edge of the fabric. They're really only like 1/8 of an inch, definitely less than 1/4 of an inch. But you just snip right into the edge of the fabric. The next thing we need to do is mark our darts. So one way that you can do it is usually on a pattern piece, you'll have a punch hole right here at the dart point, and you'll mark that, and then you can connect that to your dart legs to have a visual representation of the dart. For this class, the easiest way I like to do it is take my pattern piece off of my fabric, cut along one of these dart legs, fold the paper back along the other dart leg, and now when you lay it back on your fabric, make sure that your notches are still aligned. But you can take a fabric marking tool and just mark the dart legs from there. And again, just like with cutting, you kind of have to walk your fingers along the edge of the pattern piece to keep the fabric from crawling away from you. Because if you don't, do you see how the fabric will just crawl away? But if you use your fingers to help stabilize it, it will work a lot better. And you'll get a really accurate, your markings will be really accurate to the dart. I also like to fold back at the dart point and give myself a little tick mark right there so I know that, oh, my dart legs go all the way and end there. Don't forget that we cut this pattern piece on the fold, which means that when we unfold it, we have one front bodice piece. So not only did you mark your dart like that, you have to unfold it, put your pattern piece on the other side, make sure it's aligned really well, and get your markings over here. Mark your dart point really well, like that. And then use your ruler to connect that dart point to the notches for your dart legs. I like to try to show a few different ways to do things so then you get to decide what works best for you or makes the most sense. Anyway, make sure that the markings for your darts are on the wrong side of your fabric, okay? And go ahead and do the exact same thing with your back bodice. We'll save this one for later. Now don't forget, when we cut this, we ended up cutting 2 layers, so now we have 2 pieces. Instead of being the exact same, they should be a mirror image of one another. That's how we know we have a left and a right, okay? Make sure on the wrong side of the other piece, you are also putting your dart markings. Something different about the contour dart is that the dart legs never reach the edge of our fabric. It's completely contained within the pattern piece. So I want you to take your paper pattern and I want you to fold it and snip. I am going to cut around the dotted line and cut the dart out of the paper. Do not cut it out of your fabric. All right, so now that you have the contour dart cut out, you can lay it back on your fabric. Now, I always like to have dart markings on the wrong side of the fabric because that's what's going to be visible as we're sewing. So make sure you turn it so you're seeing the wrong side of your fabric and lay your pattern piece on it. And do the same thing, mark your darts. I give myself a cross mark so I can really see where the end of the dart is. Before we get to sewing, let's talk about darts. Darts are the thing that takes just a flat piece of fabric and molds it into a 3-dimensional shape, okay? That will fit on a dress form or a body. So as we're sewing these, we are no longer going to have a project that is just flat and easily pressed. So we're gonna have to kind of change the way we press a little bit, and I'll show you that as we go. So grab your front and back bodice pieces that you cut, and these are all of the plain darts that we're gonna sew. So let's go over to our machine and we'll start sewing them. So this is an example of your plain dart sample that you're gonna turn in. It kind of looks like a cute little baby shirt, okay? It's sewn together at the shoulder seams, but not at the side seams, okay? I'm gonna open it up here. You'll see that the front bodice part that is cut on the fold has 2 darts coming from the bust out to the side seams. And then the back bodices, where you cut 2 of them, has darts that come up from the waist up to kind of the shoulder blade area. So we are gonna sew 4 plain darts total, and then we are gonna sew our front and backs together at the shoulder seams. All right, let's fold our dart so we can sew it. Again, this is the dart point. These are the dart legs, and you should have notches at the ends of your dart legs. The marking should be on the wrong side of the fabric, so I want you to flip it to the right side of the fabric and bring your notches so the right sides are together and your notches are in alignment. The next thing I want you to do is grab and fold right on your dart point, okay? And smooth the fabric up, just kind of finger press it. I'm gonna take a pin and place it right through at the dart point. That pin is to kind of tell me that's where I'm gonna stop my stitching. And I'm gonna take another pin and I'm gonna stick it in right on the dart leg. And when you flip it over, you should see that right where it comes out should also be right on the dart leg. I need to adjust mine a little bit. But keep adjusting so that right where your pin pokes in is right on a dart leg, and right where it comes out on the other side is on the other dart leg. Okay? And then stick it in to stabilize it. So make sure that Your notches are in alignment. Make sure your notches are in alignment. Your pin is going through exactly right on both dart legs, and then this pin is telling you right where your dart point stops. Now we're ready to stitch our dart. We're going to start here on the notches at the ends of our dart legs on the edge of our pattern piece. You're going to backstitch at the end just like we normally do, just to help hold your stitches in place. Now, as you're stitching, your stitch line should be right on your markings, okay? And what you're doing is you're slowly tapering your stitch line closer to this fold. Once we get about an inch from our dart point, I want you to stop. All right, I'm about an inch from my dart point. I am going to take, and my stitch length dial over here, I'm going to turn it down to about 1.5. That's going to make it so I have little tiny stitches. And the reason I'm doing that is because there's a lot of stress at the end of this dart point. I want my stitches to be closer together to help hold it well. So as I'm stitching, I am still tapering closer and closer to the edge of the fabric. And once I get to right where this pin is, I want my needle and my stitching to fall off the edge of the fabric. We are not back stitching at the dart point. Once you're done stitching, it should look something like this. Have a back stitch, stitching right on that line you made for your dart. And then your stitch length, you lower it an inch away from the dart point, and your stitching should taper off the edge of the fabric right at the dart point. So pull your project out and give yourself some nice long thread tails. Instead of back stitching, we are going to tie a knot right here at our dart point. And double knot it just like you would like tying your shoes. Since we've sewn our darts, you can see that our fabric pieces are no longer laying flat. They're now three-dimensional. So what we need to do is grab what we call a tailor's ham. It's kind of this rounded shape, and what it's going to do is help us form our darts over that rounded shape so that we can still press them and press them nicely. Now, a default for pressing darts. Horizontal darts are always, the intake is always going to be pressed downward on the body. And for vertical darts, the intake is always going to be pressed towards the center of the body. So this long straight edge on our back bodice pieces is the center back. So we're going to press our intakes towards that. And these intakes are going to be pressed downward. So as I go to press this, I like to really mold it around the shape of the ham so that I'm not pressing any creases in, especially near the dart point. And I'm going to fold my intake downward. And just like we do when we press our seams open, we want to make sure that these fabric pieces are really pulled apart so we don't get any folds along the dart. And just press. I like to start pressing from the wrong side of the fabric and really make sure you pull those pieces apart as you're nearing the dart point and kind of stretch it around the shape of the tailor's ham. Once I press it from the wrong side, I flip it over and make sure I don't have any folds or especially like puckers or creases right here. I usually go and press from this side as well, just for good measure. This is yet another example of how pressing makes everything just look so, so good. What I'm looking for when I grade these is that there's no folds or creases on this fabric, there's no puckers at the dart point, and that your stitching follows exactly your markings that you made. So continue pressing your other darts in the same way. So we're gonna put the back bodices on the front bodices, right sides together at the shoulder seams. And we're going to stitch these together at the shoulders with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Shoulder seams, you can go ahead and press these seams open really well, and you are done with your plain seam sample. Now, according to our markings, this dart never reaches the edge of our fabric. So how are we gonna do that? On our plain darts, we always started at the widest point, but that was on the edge of our fabric. So we're kind of gonna do the same thing here, but we are going to treat this contour dart as though it is 2 separate plain darts. So below this midpoint here, this is a plain dart. You're gonna start at the widest part and stitch towards this dart point. And then you're gonna take it off your machine, fold it again, and sew this plain dart. Start here at the widest point and sew to the dart point. What's gonna happen here is your stitching should overlap in the middle so that it will all be secured and beautiful. And again, we're gonna press it the same way. We're gonna press as though we're pressing 2 plain darts, just press this first half first, and then this second half next. So meet me over at the machine and I'll show you how to sew it. Just like we did with our plain darts, we're gonna start folding this together at the widest point, okay? So I'm gonna start here and I'm going to bring, remember our markings are on the wrong side of the fabric. We want to bring the right sides of the fabric together. So I am going to pinch this and fold it, and I'm going to crease right on the dart point over here. Fold it like that. Still gonna take my pins, and when I stick it through the widest part of my dart, I just wanna make sure that I stick it through right on that dart leg, and then where it comes out on the other side should be right on the dart leg as well. I always like to put a pin at the dart point, and I also like to have a mark that way so that I can see it on my fabric exactly where I should stop stitching. And if you need to put a pin in the middle as well, you can. Just make sure when you stick it in right on your dart point that it comes out right on the other dart point. That one is not very accurate. Beautiful. I'm gonna start here at the widest part of my dart point. I am going to stitch just like I did my plain darts. I'm gonna stitch until I'm about 1 inch from my dart point, and then I'm gonna turn my stitch length down and taper my stitching off the edge of my fabric. Now, I don't want there to be a big jump off the edge of your fabric. It should very smoothly just taper right off the edge. Again, we're gonna tie a knot instead of doing a back stitch. And the knot is just to secure your stitching so it doesn't come out. Now I've got my dart here. I am going to flip it over so the widest part is up here. And I'm just gonna fold it like I did all my other darts. Find my dart point, crease it right there. Now the only difference between this and any other of the darts we've sewn is that we are going to backstitch at the beginning and just make sure that our stitching overlaps the previous stitching from the other side of the contour dart. Right where your needle is coming down is going to be right on top of some of your previous stitches from the first side you stitched. I'm going to backstitch and then continue going forward. Oops, I forgot I turned my stitch length up. Once I'm an inch from the end, I'm going to turn my stitch length down and stitch right off the edge, right where that dart point is. Once you're done sewing your contour dart, this is what you should have. You should have your stitching fall right on your markings on both sides. You should have an overlap on your stitching right here in the middle at the widest point, and your stitching should taper off the edge of your fabric gently right at the dart points. Same thing we did with our other darts. You're going to use your tailor's ham to press it, and we are pressing it towards this straight edge. The straight edge is the center back seam, so to say. This is the side seam. So we're going to press the intake towards the center back. And just worry about 1/2 of the contour dart at a time as you're pressing. So like splay the fabric out over the tailor's ham and press. And I like to go and do the other half of it before I flip it over. This is where I flip it over, and usually you'll have some creases right here in the middle or possibly at the dart points that you want to get out. But just give it a good press on the other side as well. And that is your finalized contour dart sample. You're done with skill 2.